ENFPs, according to the MBTI manual, make up 8.1% of the population, making this the 7th most common of the 16 types in the US population. And I'll also mention that it's the most common intuitive type. And we've mentioned before that 73% of the population has a preference for sensing and only 27% for intuition. Yeah, so that's a pretty big percentage given how small a percentage. It's a big percentage of the small percentage.
Yes.
So ENFPs are known for appearing supportive, positive, innovative, curious, and warm. They prize genuineness, as you've heard in all of the NFPs.
Right.
Appreciation, energy, and new ideas. And they use these qualities to help groups function, and that word groups, function to the best of their abilities and help individuals feel included. ENFPs have a great appreciation for finding new, creative, and exciting possibilities as well as meaning in life. This is most easily accomplished in harmonious environments that allow for flexibility, authenticity, and teamwork. Along with the zest ENFPs usually have for life, they often love to make work enjoyable and playful. They also generally prefer to do work they find personally meaningful. As family members and friends, ENFPs are typically fun, energetic, and perceptive about the needs of their loved ones, in addition to being loyal. Welcome to Personality Playbook. My name is Sadie Young.
And I'm Kayla Whittle.
And if you haven't noticed, we're talking about ENFPs now, and we happen to have, I'm just going to say it, my favorite ENFP in our presence.
Sweet.
Yay!
Yeah.
So the words that we use, the adjectives we use to describe ENFPs are creative, enthusiastic, social, and perceptive. And you'll notice that creative word, I think, pops up on most of the NFs because that's true for all of us, but you aren't going to hear enthusiastic on the introvert. Not that we can't be, but it's not a defining characteristic like it is for ENFPs.
Yes.
And if you're interested in the type dynamics of an ENFP, we have dominant extroverted intuition with auxiliary introverted feeling, tertiary thinking, and inferior introverted sensing.
Yes.
So if that doesn't make any sense to you, there will be more videos.
Hang tight for type dynamic videos.
If that sounded like math and you're an NF, we know you didn't really like that.
Kind of like the large portion of a small, large portion of a small piece.
Percentage of a small percentage.
If you go back and review the tapes, you need to put like the woman who's like in the meme who's like, what's happening? And there's like letters and geometry happening above her. So that was my brain when you were saying that. And I was like, I know, I follow. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. But that is one of those things that is like when you have to watch a show twice and then you're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those things. Yeah. So basically 8%, all right, only 27% of the population is intuitive.
Right.
And 8%
of intuitive types. No, that's not what you're saying.
No.
I'm trying.
8% out of that 27%, not 8% of it.
Yes.
But 8% out of it.
Okay.
Is our ENFPs.
Okay. There you go.
No, I don't even make sense.
Really, it's just the most common NF type.
It is the most oh, well, sure, if you want to say it in English.
Oh, man. No.
How is that fun?
So how do you, it's interesting, right? Like you did such an eloquent job talking about INFJs. And here I am like, I don't know. I'm an ENFP. Ask me anything, right? No, I think one of the primary experiences, right, that I've had in my life as an ENFP is that the way that I'm perceived by other people can vary drastically.
Yeah.
Sometimes with the same person.
Sure.
Right. So like there are some days where it's like, that girl doesn't have her head on straight. You know what I mean? Like she can't keep up with anything, or like, what in the world? You know what I mean? Like who is that? And then there are other days where that same person, I'd be like, wow, like there's more substance there than I thought.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think because of the like happy-go-lucky enthusiasm, I might come in a meeting and be like dancing and cutting up. Do you know what I mean? Literally.
But it doesn't mean that you can't be a serious person who cares about their work and, gets stuff done.
Exactly.
Right.
And those two things are interesting, but that would only be true. That is only true because my work is meaningful and I care about it deeply.
Sure.
Right? Like when I worked at Libby Lou in high school, I just danced and sang and did all the things, and I didn't care about my work that much.
Gotcha.
So I really was that person.
Yeah. And if you did data entry, you'd probably cry.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would ask for money outside of Kroger before I did data entry.
Well, there you go.
I would sing on a mic outside of Kroger
because you're too positive to cry every day doing data entry.
Exactly.
Yes, I totally.
I wouldn't
get
stay home and cry. I would go somewhere else and try to earn money with my sparkle. Right.
Right.
Yeah, but I think to me, like that's the most interesting and I think telling part of my life experience is that people's perceptions of me waver between, oh, she's like super fun, I like having her around, to like, oh, she has some meaningful things to say.
Right.
Right. And it's very like back and forth. I read one description of an ENFP one time. I can't remember where it was, but it really resonated with me. And it was about being a guest at a wedding party.
Okay.
And it said ENFPs will surprise you because they will be out doing the Cupid shuffle on the dance floor and then come back and sit down next to you and make you cry because they ask you a question that you needed to be asked that day.
Right.
And those seem like opposing things.
Yeah, but when you know ENFPs, they're absolutely not.
Right. Because
there's enthusiasm, but there's also a really great NF ability to be in tune with people and to understand what's going on with that person.
Right.
And yeah, those two things make complete sense inside an ENFP, even though you rarely find them elsewhere together in the world.
Right. And I think that's the piece, it's like, so my husband is an ISTJ, which is like an interesting relationship, right? Because we're
exact opposite.
Yeah, exact opposite in all these, different letters. And I think that's definitely his experience of me.
Yeah.
Right. Where he's like, how do you know every Disney song lyric from every movie ever?
Right.
And you do not know where your keys currently are in the house.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's his experience. What is happening? Like, how are you getting, like, I'm getting my doctorate right now. Like, how are you getting your doctorate and keeping up with everything as it relates to that? And then you're like, oh goodness, I totally forgot the kids have a Thanksgiving party today. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because in his mind, he's like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, what is actually going on here? Right.
Well, and I think we talk about GISTI planning and GISTI possibilities and all of those kinds of things. And, I think when we talk about intuitive types, to me, the song lyrics make sense because songs have patterns, which are melodies.
Right.
And so intuitive types in general, really, I think those things stick with us more than they do things that do not have a pattern to them.
Right. And we make connections to those things.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's always there, I think, for intuitive types.
Right.
Keys are a detail. And that's not very GISTy.
Yeah, keys are definitely a detail.
It's small.
It's very interesting. And here's a good example that happened just this week. So we're learning some new music in this choir that I'm a part of. Mm-hmm. And it's some Christmas music. And there's this key change in one of the songs. And the key change is literally from The Little Mermaid. It is the same pattern of key change in The Little Mermaid. It's like, all I need is a rock. And I'm just going to like put on the rock. Right. But it's this random Christmas song. And we like weren't getting it. You know what I mean? Like as a choir. And I was like, guys, it's The Little Mermaid. And I had maybe 3 people go, yeah, it's The Little Mermaid. And then the other people were like, what did he say? You know what I mean? Like, what is actually wrong with you? But that was that pattern that I heard, right? Like,
yes.
And it was like, hey guys, and to me, that was how I could memorize. That was how I could execute moving forward, was connecting it to something that I knew before. You know, which is the sound. And for me, and here's the other thing to point out, not all ENFPs love music, right?
Sure.
Like that is definitely my creative outlet. So other ENFPs are going to have other creative outlets and, maybe not always be performers. But I will say that if you're ever a part of an acting guild or a part of a choir, a part of a lot of performers, you will find a lot of ENFPs there.
Sure.
Because there's a little bit of like a showboat.
Well, I mean, you talk about
that.
sparkle. So, I have been known to, I think I said to Ben yesterday that ENFPs are the human equivalent of jazz hands. I mean that in a nice way.
Yeah.
But, there's always a little bit of that going on because it's...
You never know.
And when you see that, I mean, just as a person in general, you don't necessarily, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I think I'm, probably speaking for some other people too.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see jazz hands and think that they have tremendous depth.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
then,
well, that's what I was going to say is that I think it comes across fake.
Right.
Right. But I'm genuinely this way.
Well, we talked about, there's a disarming quality to that sparkle. I think it's supposed to help people feel less formal.
Right. Feel more comfortable.
And more relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but when you actually sit down and talk to an ENFP on a deeper level, you realize there is a deeper level.
Right.
Maybe not for everybody, but that's what I found with ENFPs is that there's generally a deeper level.
Right.
And it can go really, really deep.
Yes. Sometimes dark.
And it can go dark.
Listen, let's be honest.
Yes.
ENFPs can have a dark side. Okay.
Yes. And that's something that I've talked to you about before. And I've told you before that I don't see the same. So a lot of ENFPs that I have met, it's almost an aura. I can't come up with a better word than that. But
something comes over us.
There's dark mist. Okay. Around the pumpkins. I mean, it was just Halloween.
Where it's like,
right?
You're great. I trust you. And I also deeply don't.
Well, I wouldn't even describe it that for me.
I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know.
But yeah, because I've talked to Kayla about this because I've seen it in lots and lots of ENFPs and I don't see the same thing in you. But to me, it's a distinctly different, like I get the experience of having this, wonderful, deep person who's also very sparkly and, who brings joy to the room and, lights up the room, those kinds of things. Well, oh, please. It's what you do. Come on. But I can also I can see in their eyes that there's a sadness there or, a darkness of, and a lot of times it's probably not feeling that way on the inside, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's more palpable to me with ENFPs than it is with any other type that there's often that second, and it's like a shadow.
Yeah, kind of like the Robin Williams thing.
Yes, and that's what I'm thinking about the whole way through, but I'm also thinking of some other people who
so there's this like sparkle thing, but then because a lot of the feeling is not what I lead with, my personal feelings, right? Which again, we'll get into type dynamics before, or later, before. I don't know what I would say before. We'll get into type dynamics
do it
later.
We're
going to time travel.
Time travel.
No, I think, and I personally did a lot of work to figure out how I can express that.
Yeah.
And who those people are. Because it's interesting because there's so much about me that's just very not private. You know what I mean? Like it's very like I'm open. But then there's some things that are very deeply private.
Yeah.
And that are protected maybe even with bigger, stronger walls than some introverts.
I absolutely think so.
And you have to do the work. For me, it was in therapy to decide who your safe places are.
Yeah.
To share those things with. And vulnerability in those spaces is like weirdly challenging.
Sure.
For an ENFP, right? Because again, there's like so much of my life that's just like on display, open book, to the point where my husband's like, could you be like a little more private? Like, I don't want everybody to know that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. But then there's this space, right? And for me, I'll just be, since I'm talking about vulnerability, for me, that space that's hard to share is the insecure space. And I don't know if that's true for other ENFPs or not. So I can't speak that would be like the hard place for me to go to.
Sure.
But like for me, and I can connect because I'm good at connecting. I can connect that like insecurity of how people perceive me or the way that I look or body image. You know what I mean? Like those have been like historically things that I've dealt with. Mm-hmm. And I can connect a current experience today with 57 to 60 other experiences I've had throughout my life to prove that I'm valid.
Right.
right? Because I'm a good connector and I can see patterns in people and how they're responding to me. And so I can use that as evidence for fueling my insecurity. I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's the key feature, is that we have really cool sparkly powers that we can use for good, but they can be used to take us down. And because we interior function our feeling, we take ourselves down.
Yeah. Well, and as you were talking about that
makes me sound a lot sadder than I really am.
Oh, I know.
But I'm just being honest. Like, that's what I've dealt with, right? So,
and yeah, what you're describing is, I can see that being what I've seen in people.
Sure.
And I was thinking about it because even though I don't seem to keep things to myself, I'm a much more open book than most INFJs are.
Right.
But because I process things so internally, I think that dark part of myself, which we always keep the darker part of ourselves.
Yeah, everybody does.
Right. But I think since I process so much of the good part internally too, those things are not too far away from each other.
Right.
So it's not, you move on through from the good part to the dark part.
Right.
And it may move around a little bit where I cut people off.
Sure.
It's like a continuum kind of a situation.
Right.
Whereas I think for ENFPs, we have the sparkly part out here.
Right.
And we have the dark part down here.
Yeah.
And they're not
very
connected.
dichotomous. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. So there's a big gap in between. And so that makes sense to me why that would appear to be such a separate part, because it is more separate.
Yeah.
It's not always sitting right there.
Right.
So for me, it's like, if I reach 2 inches
a little bit of both.
there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 So
well, there you go.
That's really interesting. And, but at the same time, it's not something that I necessarily see with the other EP types.
I could agree with that. Yeah.
So So I'll be curious to talk about that with some of the other things.
Yeah. How that translates. The best way for me to describe it is the Robin Williams thing, is like, like who you have that's this like big boisterous personality that you're like drawn to, and that can somehow like make light of these situations that you shouldn't be able to make light of, but then there's obviously some like inner turmoil happening, right? And that they can either deal with or not deal with,
right? And of course, in his case, we know now that he was very depressed,
right?
And that's not to say that all ENFPs are very depressed.
No, that's what I said. Is like I could see how, without pushing myself to vulnerability in those spaces where I really want to keep feelings interior, inside. Yeah. And like requiring myself to do that is the reason why I'm not spiraling. Yeah. Right? Like I don't think I'm spiraling, but I can see. Yeah. It doesn't seem like that far of a step. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if I wasn't healthy, like it's plausible.
Yeah, I can see that. Right.
Yeah.
It's not me, but I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. What do they say? The brightest lights burn the fastest or something. I'm just like full of the crap today.
Yeah. No, actually, I just studied stars with my fourth grader.
Oh, fun.
And a blue star has the brightest light, but the shortest lifespan because it burns so bright and hot that it doesn't last a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And by that, we mean like a billion years instead of...
I know. Well, that's what when we were studying it, we even said that. I was like, okay, this one said a billion, this one said a trillion, this one said a million. I was like, they don't know what they're talking about. Right. Like, they know that it's more and less. Like, I'll give them that, but like, come on. Like,
it's longer than a person and less than eternity. Somewhere in there.
Exactly. They're just throwing out random things at this point.
That's like we were talking in one of our other videos about The Chosen. If you guys have watched The Chosen, the word soon comes up all the time. And you're like, there's that word.
There's soon.
It kind of doesn't mean anything. Soon could mean 20 minutes from now or in 1,000 years.
Exactly.
One of those two.
Yeah. And when we're talking about God, then soon is even more ambiguous. Yeah.
So what do you think about that as a start?
I think that's a good start on ENFPs. And I think it's really full, right? Because I think sometimes we end at that sparkle piece. And I think it's good for us to complete that story.
Yes.
About this like kind of like deep feeling place that's not shared often. So I think it's a full picture.
Right. I like that too.
Yeah.
So, and one thing we say is that introverts have to extrovert. in order to function in the world. I mean, that's becoming less and less so the more, you can get stuff delivered. DoorDash and Instacart
Thank you.
have made it.
COVID? Ooh, that feels weird.
I was doing that stuff before COVID.
Yeah, that's true.
Woohoo! But, but extroverts don't have to introvert as much.
Right.
So you'll
But
find...
I do have to J.
Of course. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
So, once again, if you want to be a functioning member of society, which is a big if. Some people are not into that.
Yeah.
But, definitely, I would say, especially for ENFPs, most do introvert because they have this like people-centric piece and they'll usually share that with themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a counselor, right?
Right.
So
you had to.
Yeah, I kind of have to introvert in some ways, or at least encourage other people, give other people space.
Right. So,
because that is the danger, I think, as an ENFP.
Sure.
Is not being mindful enough of others to give them room to breathe, to think, to speak.
Right. You're so capable of filling up a room.
Yeah.
And
it's not that I want to shrink, right? Because I spend a lot of my time in my life, I'm too big, I'm too much. Sure. Instead of seeing it like I have to shrink no matter what because I'm too big and I'm too much, seeing it like this is who I am, but I can also love and be mindful of the people that are around me and what they need.
Right.
And say, I need to pull back so they have space to be themselves.
Right. Because that is the
which is different than I need to live my life shrinking.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It's an expression of your desire to help people and connect with people, is that in order to let them do that, you have to not shrink, but
give them room,
give them space. Yeah. So I think that's an excellent start to ENFP.
Yay!
And we're going to cue the ninjas on that one.
Yep.
Can these have jazz hands? I shouldn't have said that because now I'm going to have to make
and
jazz
all
hands.
that jazz.
All right. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be back soon with more types.
Bye.
Bye.